Yeah, maybe you can just tell us who else is in the room at the moment. Just
Sure, I'll start. My name is Oliver Pearson. I'm the Director for Forest in the Department of Forest, Parks and Rec.
Chris Brooks, owner of Vermont Woodland Company.
Alan Thompson, board president of Vermont Woodlands Association. Waterway.
I'm Tina Lowry. I live in Nebraska.
Luke McNally of the Rough Grouse Society. I'm a partner forester with the Vermont Arctics.
My name is Abby Long. I'm the executive director for the Kingdom Trail Association.
Jill Sutcliffe Jaren, I represent the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. And I believe it really mentions
Oh, and I'm Sonia, committee assistant to LSA.
All right, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. It's great to be here talking to you today about the Vermont Forest Futures Strategic Roadmap. And I'm thrilled that 4 members of our implementation steering committee who just introduced themselves will be here speaking to you as well. But this very important initiative that the state and our partners and partner organizations statewide are working together to implement. So why the roadmap? Well, first, forests are important. We depend on forests to protect the environment, to support biodiversity, to sustain our economy, to provide us with a range of forest products, essentials like building materials, furniture, and heat, support a growing outdoor rec sector, and forest products are really woven into the fabric of Vermont life. Second, forests and forest-based livelihoods are under threat for different reasons in Vermont, which we'll speak about over the course of this presentation. And I think the legislature recognized that threat and passed in 2022 Act 183, which directed the Commissioner of Forest, Parks and Rec to develop the Vermont Forest Future Strategic Roadmap to assess the current state of Vermont's forest economy and to identify opportunities to strengthen, modernize, promote the forest product sector into the future, into a really prosperous and vibrant sector going forward. The legislature gave us some very specific asks to achieve in the roadmap, increase sustainable economic development and jobs in Vermont's forest economy, promote ways to expand the workforce and strengthen forest products enterprises, promote the importance of healthy, resilient, and sustainably managed working forests to provide a diverse array of high-quality products now and into the future. And really, this is where the roadmap, where the rubber hits the road, identify actionable strategies to strengthen, modernize, and promote the forest products and sector, new product development, new markets, new manufacturing processes, and new ways to utilize and market Vermont forest products. So this roadmap was developed with input from many different parties representing diverse users of Vermont's forests. And this intentional engagement provided an opportunity for stakeholders to really take a deep dive and help us figure out how to come up with a plan to address these challenges that the industry is facing. We did have a very diverse advisory panel that supported the development of the roadmap. A number of those people are here with us. And it really took a big tense approach as we put this plan together. And it was finalized in March 2024. I just have 2 more slides before I hand it over to some of my colleagues, but I wanted to sort of speak about one of the key parts of the roadmap development process. So the roadmap was a scenario-based planning process where we identified different scenarios for potential futures of Vermont's forest products sector. And these scenarios enabled the stakeholders that we were consulting to understand different plausible future scenarios and explore their views to see which was the most desired and preferred and expected future for Vermont's forest economy over 10 years. And we got a lot of input on this. A lot of people voted and said what they thought was their preferred scenario for the future of the sector. And there's clear response, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner of this image where the dots represent number of votes. The future that was preferred by the stakeholders we consulted was one in which an intentional forest management effort is coupled with proactive industry adaptation, helping to drive innovation and vibrancy. So this type of approach was strongly preferred. Sort of the opposite, the lower left-hand corner would be more of a hands-off approach with traditional forestry, forest management techniques sort of continuing. And so that was a really, really strong marching order for us. And what we learned was that this preferred forest future for Vermont's forest sector was intentional forest management, proactive industry adaptation, public and private capital investing in innovation, technology, and marketing, forest health and forest management to maintain working forests and mitigate these threats to forest health that I've mentioned, support the workforce to evolve, develop new skills, particularly as the wood product sector adapts more technology, and help the industry train, change, evolve, focus on regional supply chains, innovative networks, and new products, and integrate multiple uses. And your recreation is just one example of that. Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta go this slide here. And what we came up with was a roadmap that was published in January 2024 that represents sort of the collective commitment of all the partners to support our state's forests. And the roadmap is based around the central goal of growing a prosperous and strong forest product sector, for a prosperous forest economy, and then 5 interconnected pillars that support the implementation of the roadmap. And so each one of us will address one of the pillars. So we spent a lot of time, we spent over a year developing this roadmap. We felt this investment was more than worthwhile. As you know, Vermont has 4.5 million acres of forest. Around 80% is privately owned. The rest is split between 10% federal, 10% state owned. The forest economy provides more than 13,000 jobs, more than $2 billion in economic output. It supports growing recreational and tourism sectors. And really, this economy relies on access to forest lands. And the roadmap is a tool to help us understand how this access to forest land can maintain intact forests, address challenges such as workforce shortages, rising costs, climate-related disruptions, and other uncertainties across the sector, including a misunderstanding of forest management in the public domain. There's also challenges you'll hear about, I think, from other speakers about some of the market shocks and market issues, closures of forest products businesses, destabilizing the forest economy in Vermont and threatening Vermont's forested working landscape. And so really addressing those through the roadmap is a key goal. And finally, to think about how we can better understand and work with changing public perceptions around how forests should be used and do a better job telling our story about why forest management is important. So for all those reasons, the roadmap was a very important effort. We're thrilled that the legislature empowered us to take this on. We're thrilled that we have a complete roadmap now. I'm now going to transition into asking some of our other speakers to walk you through the different pillars that make up the roadmap. And I'll conclude my opening remarks by saying, please ask questions. We love coming in here and having a dialogue with members of this committee. So I think Luke, there he is. Luke is up first to talk about pillar number 1. You get the hot seat, Luke.
All right, thanks, Oliver.
Hi, Luke.
Hi, folks.
How are you?
Good, thanks. Okay, so the first pillar is forest management and land use. And this pillar is all about managing for increased forest health across our landscape in the Northeast. We know that our forests are growing in size. There was a downward trend, obviously, in the 19th century with the amount of forest land that we had here in New York or in the Northeast. And over the 20th century, we rebounded from that, and our total amount of forest grew. And now we're starting to see a slight decline, actually, in the total forest cover due to development, things like that. Our forests are getting healthier according to the FIA data. So that's the Forest Inventory and Analysis data for the U.S. Forest Service product across the United States. So we're seeing that the quality of our forests are increasing. The size of our trees are actually increasing on a landscape scale. However, the total amount of acreage is shrinking, and that's a problem. Promoting land use policies to maintain the working forest. So making sure that we have options for landowners and for working forests, like the UVA current use program, and making sure landowners have options to be empowered and incentives to get more work done and produce quality forest products and maintain their land, maintain the ecological integrity of their land. So some of these things would include, not only the UVA program, but working with programs like the NRCS, so the kind of work that I do. I spend a lot of time managing invasive species. It's a huge problem here in Vermont. It's been getting a lot worse since 2012 approximately. We really saw a huge uptick in invasive species in our forests. And then managing for forest health and diversity across the landscape for wildlife habitat, as well as for forest products. Just a couple more items. 19,000 parcels are currently enrolled in UVA, so that's a little bit more than half of all the forested acreage in Vermont. The Act 250 process has been identified as a barrier to the forest industry to either retrofit existing facilities or build new facilities. So that's things like sawmills and log yards and things of that nature. So there's a forest products permitting report that's ongoing right now that Oliver's been involved with to streamline this permitting process so that we can do a little bit better by our industry folks.
Representative Lipsky.
And Lou, is it possible for you to enlighten the committee a little on your specialty with regard to game bird and wildlife forest management, how it benefits both diversity and sustainability
Yeah, sure. So
of the population?
yeah, so throughout some point in the 20th century, we came up with this idea of like partner biologists and partner foresters. Ducks Unlimited and Pheasants Forever have been leaders in developing kind of that sort of framework. And so my organization and other similar conservation organizations, we staff biologists and foresters throughout probably all 50 states to be sort of kind of like ombudsman for NRCS programs, although I don't just work with NRCS programs. It's the primary tool that we use. The largest funding mechanism really for habitat and conservation work on private land in the country. So I do a lot of outreach to private landowners, stuff that your NRCS staff just do not have time to do. So I do a lot of coffee at the kitchen table with farmers and forest landowners, talking about their forests, talking about their conservation issues. I work for the Rough Grouse Society, so we were founded originally around this idea of grouse and woodcock and other bird species. We do a lot of work with warblers and other migratory birds that share similar habitat requirements to grouse, but it's not, I don't really see my work as just geared towards huntable species. We do a lot of things to just talk to landowners about what their issues are. So if they're forest trails, they have erosion on their property, we try to work with them to get them funding to fix erosion. If they have invasive species, we can do that. And we can do a variety of treatments to increase forest cover diversity across the landscape. We have a landscape which is to put things in very general terms, it's kind of homogeneous, right? Our forests are in this like median age class, more or less, so there's not a lot of old forest characteristics and there's not a lot of young forest characteristics either. So to put it simply, like we're trying to diversify the cover type as much as we can. The Vermont Conservation Design document, which came out several years ago, called for both an increase in young forest and old forest characteristics. And we're not quite meeting our goals quite yet to meet the acreage requirements for that plan. So
Representative Morgan.
I live in the Champlain Valley. We have a lot of buckthorn. We have a lot of honeysuckle that's taking over. And you can't imagine how much in some of the places.
yeah.
But we also have ash and we have beech and we have elm that are all on their way out in our woods. The beech, you can just see the scaling and they're just coming apart, and the ash and in Grand Isle County, and then coming, I think, into Chittenden now, is just in the islands, it's just about all wiped out. They're cutting it just to get the dead stuff out. And yet you say that the forests are in better shape than they used to be. Is it just because of my area, or is this not happening all through the state?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's hard to summarize across the landscape. I think the FIA data is telling us that our acceptable growing stock is increasing. So what that means is, we are growing bigger trees and healthier genetics that are going to produce better wood, wood products in general. We in the 19th century, we faced a lot of deforestation in this country. In the 20th century, we kind of got back on track, and then now we're dipping down again a little bit. But the invasives issue, I don't think is captured in that FIA data, because that's looking really at the saw logs, the forest products. The invasives issue in the Champlain Valley, I think, is really an existential threat both to the forest industry and to wildlife habitat. I don't think it's getting enough attention. It's a difficult problem to solve. A lot of people don't want to work with herbicides. They're scared of them, or they don't understand them.
I know the state, a few years back, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they would pay individual landowners to get rid of the honeysuckle. If they could get it out and document it, they were paid. It wasn't a lot, but they would be paid to make the effort. And I don't know if that program still exists.
I'm not aware of that program. We can look into that and get back to the committee with a concrete answer. Alan, did you want to come in on that?
Well, it's a federal program to offer the same service, so most of those resources are federal dollars that get funneled through this interstate. So Luke works with Rough Grouse Society that also serves as a conduit for the same resource. If you want to get rid of invasive plants, Luke would be a resource, including NRCS directly.
Sure. So we have 5 pillars to get through. Maybe.
Yeah. Why don't we hold questions, if that's all right with the committee? We will certainly invite anyone back to delve into any of the areas in more detail. But if we can get through the overview, I think that would be useful this afternoon. Yeah. So who's next then?
Mr. Brooks.
Business environment and conditions. My name is Chris Brooks. I am the Vermont Wood Pellet Company. I come from 5 generations of people who have been working in the woods. We've been through a lot of different business climates, beginning with the first mill we built that we logged everything around it and there was no more trees. We learned that lesson. Don't do that. Business environment and the condition. What's happening now? The last 2 years, we've had unbelievable challenges. Too warm to get into the woods, so the guys can't go cut trees. High interest rates, which limited growth in building sector. And that led to, at least in the southern part of the state, 2 mills that just shut down, closed, A. Johnson and Mill River. And nobody could get anything. I can make as many pellets as I make, I'll sell. I'm sold out every single year. So my limiting factor right now for the last 2 years has been wood supply, and that's all. So I take the top of the tree, the bottom of the tree goes to the mill where they make lumber. Nice mix. And by the way, we go down to 6 inches. Smaller than that needs to stay in the woods to regenerate, to help with the nutrients in the soil. At any rate, so our challenge has been in the last year, labor, just like every other business, and then wood supply. And we can do one thing, we can increase our price, but that forces people in the woods when they really shouldn't go to the woods. I mean, we learned that lesson as a family a long time ago. Don't mess with it. So we maintain, we made it through. We didn't make as many pellets as we could. I was sad to see Mill River go out, and I was really sad to see A. Johnson go out. But we listen to what's going on with this, and I'll tell you, when they ask, you got to listen to them. So our problem solving. Mill River, a good friend of mine, we talked at length. He's gonna buy Mill River. And this is current. We will start working on a forest product center. We will be producing, I make white pine pellets. We're looking at making beech pellets at this point. And he has contract for almost all the beech he needs. So we can put it in a separate pellet mill that'll make beech. All of my waste, which is pretty much bark, goes to him to make mulch. His waste, which is dry cut off ends, comes to me to make pellets. We have a third partner who makes sawdust for ag, and will be distributing, already is distributing sawdust for ag. And it's more of a forest products center. So we are all getting together as independents together to make a forest products center in southern Vermont. And we'll see what happens, but it's our best answer at this point. But the business and environment and conditions are always changing. I mean, I tell people it's still a poker game, except now it's not 7-card stud, it's Texas Hold'em, and we'll get a watch for the flop. It's constantly changing. I've learned that from my family. It's always changing. One of the challenges at this point is traditionally, on your cash flow side, you always keep 10, maybe 15% cash ready in reserve to get through the tough times. At this point, it's 20%. And if you're building a new mill, like what we're working with, that 25% has to remain. Any outside influence, up to 50, that might cause you to spend more money is a problem and is detrimental to the ultimate success of a new mill, a new forest products center, anything like that. So we are just really on the business side, pillar 2, fleshing out where the challenges are, what's happening, where can we ask you folks for some help? So that's, my point is, when they ask, it's based on valid, real world things that are happening out in the environment.
Chris, your business is in Clarendon?
Clarendon, yeah,
Okay, and is the Mill River nearby there?
a mile away as the crow flies.
Okay.
Yeah, very close.
It would be interesting, I won't take the time now to do anything other than say this, that as we're getting ready to hear the report when it eventually comes out from that we're involved with, to hear how you're striving to open that facility has been impacted by permitting, not just Act 250, but the other permitting that we know can be an issue. So I want to have you be thinking that you come back sometime to talk about that.
Perfect. And I will tell you, when I built the mill in Clarendon, I came in, there were 18 mills, pellet mills that were supposed to be built here. I knew that the first in was going to wipe out a lot of those. So we did a study on what does Vermont want, and came up with guidelines and keys of what Vermont wants. And based on that, we located and built a mill and were permitted and produced our first pellet in 9 months. Vermont you can't come in with your elbows out pushing everybody around, but it can be done. It's just you have to know what you're doing before you go in and understand the environment, understand the card game.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And the introduction. My name is Alan Thompson, board president of Vermont Woodlands Association. We're over a century old, educating and advocating for practices of productive stewardship, use, and enjoyment of Vermont woodlands. And we've been serving landowners primarily, but other forest practitioners for that amount of time, advocating for the stewardship of Vermont's forests. One thought exercise of the value of our forests is, at any given moment in your life, for example, right now, how far away is a wood product? This is a forest that we're sitting in, essentially. And these are resources that provide us the things that we need to live. And the other value of these forests is that it's an intact ecosystem and we can continue to live in it in its reconditioned form of houses, and be heated by them and write on them and communicate with them. Hopefully, there are ways that we could see through them with innovative technology like transparent windows made of lignin. There are batteries that can be powered by nanocellulose lignin technology. I don't know anything about it, but these are flashy dreams when you think about innovative new products for wood products. I'm a practicing forester out of Waterbury, serving landowners in Champlain Valley, in central Vermont, and northern Vermont. So we do a lot of kitchen counter conversations in many different environments. I talk to landowners who moved to the state from California, scared to death of what they came from, and are thrilled to be in a place where they're not smelling smoke all the time. Last year would have been the smokiest year that a Vermonter had ever experienced in their life, Vermonters. So things are changing, and innovation, not only in the forest, but in the forest products industry, is an extremely important part of any roadmap. You saw that bubble map, that's the direction we want to go. Landowners know that. Loggers who had spent 20% of their expected time in the woods last year, loggers spent a heck of a lot less time in the woods because of how wet it was. We're in the midst of the best logging winter that I've seen probably in my practicing career. I'm young, but this is cold and it's beautiful. So wood is flowing, filling mills like they haven't seen since they started, which is a great story to hear from Chris. In order to be innovative, in order to adapt, in order to explore new technologies, business conditions need to be good. You need to have long runways to get to these new spaces and new innovative ways of doing business. That's just a part of doing business. If you can't evolve, you're going down. If you don't have the year-long runway, you're not going to evolve. That runway can be extended in all these different sectors of the industry: stewardship, manufacturing, production, and consumer use. That runway can be extended through policy that legislature controls. Vermont Woodlands Association has benefited from grants from the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. I bet any business owner, and including Chris's story, benefits from tax policy, from working lands grants that have been approved by this committee and passed legislative initiatives. We would hope that the roadmap explores, supports future funding opportunities to maintain tax incentives, policy initiatives that continues that type of funding and supports initiatives just like that, just like Chris's, just like the Lymanville biomass plant proposed in front of the PUC that's being considered right now. There are some really great shout outs I'd like to make to businesses like Silva Curl in Hardwick, making packing peanuts, replacing packing peanuts, tree-lined terrains in Moncton, making unique art with lasers. Beautiful place to get some great maps and gifts. Bard Woods Maple, you know about any maple industry expanding their maple industry into food products. These are innovative ways that businesses are using wood and forest products and keeping that forest. That's the type of innovation that we like to see and Vermont Woodlands likes to support. Regulation is the other kind of cost burden to shorten any runway for innovation and exploration of new paths for businesses. So any choices and decisions that come in front of this legislative body could just consider that regulatory burdens are real, it raises costs, and we would hope that they're appropriately considered here. If there's any ways to reduce those burdens, that'd be great. That type of recognizing that businesses need to adapt and evolve is the way that our forests stay forest. That forest stewardship can really act and do what we want our forests to continue to do, and supports our forest community and forest cultures. Because I like living here and love being able to say wood is always within a hand reach away.
Right? Any clarifying questions? Thank you.
I think what we'll do is we have a pillar on industry reputation, market profile, that's really about strengthening and maintaining the social license to operate in the forest sector and to encourage the demand, use, and appreciation for sustainably harvested forest products in Vermont. So I think I'll speak about that later if there's time, but I really want to invite Abby, one of our implementation steering committee members, to come and speak about Pillar 5, which is really her area of expertise. And then I can come back and finish up the presentation briefly, and we can get into a discussion with committee members, which I think will be the most useful.
Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. And thank you again, Representative Durfee, for allowing us to share our story. Thank you to the committee. My name is Abby Long, and I've been so grateful for the opportunity to serve on this advisory committee for this roadmap, as I was able to represent the outdoor recreation voice as the executive director for the Kingdom Trail Association. And Kingdom Trails is a nonprofit trail organization located in Vermont's beautiful Northeast Kingdom. And we actually celebrated 30 years last year, as we were founded in 1994 when mountain bikers started riding around on old logging roads, which is the traditional industry up in the Northeast Kingdom, the forest industry. And I'm proud now that our network is considered part of the new working landscape with outdoor recreation as part of the forest economy and deeply intertwined with our local community. Therefore, as Oliver mentioned, I'm presenting on Pillar 5, Forest Economy in Vermont's Communities. And this pillar really is providing a vision of how towns can maintain a strong forest culture, protecting and enriching the ways our forests contribute to the economy and community members' well-being. And as you all know, both Vermonters and visitors, they value our forests for their environmental, their cultural, and their economic benefits. And historically, as Chris mentioned, sawmills have been some of those early on economic engines of Vermont's rural towns. And they really were the hub, the heartbeat of those towns. And Chris spoke to many of those sawmills have closed in past years, but there are some that have evolved. And my favorite example of that, Jed knows this story, is Mike's Tiki Bar in downtown East Burke, serving as Kingdom Trail's main parking area, our main trailheads for mountain bikers and hikers and Nordic skiers to get on the trails. And once they finish their epic day out on the trails and in the forest, they can ride back in, go get a bite to eat at the multiple food trucks available, get a beverage at the Tiki Bar. And this is all while an active sawmill is out back behind the bar, making great steaks. This Vermont Forest Futures Strategic Roadmap, it really does provide that visions on how towns can continue this, like East Burke, and actions that elevate the forest economy's positive impact on communities across the state. The sustainable forest management that supports wildlife that Luke spoke to, recreation that I'm speaking to, the forest products, business owners, and then those cultural traditions. And Kingdom Trails really is a true example of where recreation provides that renewed economic vitality and operates in a complementary way to the forest product sector. It doesn't have to be one versus the other, forests versus outdoor recreation. And Kingdom Trails is so proud that we've figured out a way that they can go hand in glove. Because our trail organization, we not only elevate the region as an exemplary place to live, work, and play, assisting area businesses needs to recruit a workforce. Plus, we have huge economic impact. We bring in over $10 million annually to the Northeast Kingdom. And as some of you know, that's the most socially and economically challenged region of our state, of our country for that matter, as we're a federally designated REAP zone. But our trail organization has also conserved 400 acres with the Vermont Land Trust. And that's acres of forested land that's enrolled in current use and even allowed us to host our first ever timber harvest 2 winters ago. And I love sharing this warm fuzzy story from that timber harvest about 8,000. One of the products that came out of that harvest was 8,000 board feet of hemlock. And Kingdom Trails, we had the hemlock was cut and processed right there on site where it was harvested. And then we used it, the trail organization, we used it all within a 5-mile radius on our trail network for bridging. So that's grown and cut and used all right there. And that was bridging that we had to replace because we've been hit 2 years in a row by devastating floods, or B, we were replacing it just to widen some of the existing bridges to make them adaptive friendly trails, AMTV. And this is Sophomore Stewardship Day from St. J Academy. They come every year and help do some trail work, put a little sweat equity into the trails. But that's the hemlock that was harvested right there on site. And that's an adaptive mountain biker who's now able to have an awesome experience, get outside, and because they're able to. You know, KT is also proud to share our story through signage about these timber harvests, educational signage. You know, Oliver Quick passed over Pillar 4 about the forest industry's reputation. It does need some work. And I think outdoor recreation can be a vehicle for this. You know, Kingdom Trails welcomes over 100,000 visitors annually, you know, folks coming up from Boston, New York, and they're stopping in the middle of their ride at an intersection through where our timber harvest was, you know, grabbing a swig of water, reading our educational sign, and building that stronger linkage and understanding between the forest user and the positive impact that the forest economy has. You know, it's not the Lorax, that we're actually building a stronger, more resilient, climate resilient forest for them to enjoy for years to come. But I will mention that these trails are at risk. 70% of Vermont's trail system is made possible due to the generosity of private landowners. And Kingdom Trails actually is made possible because of 106 private landowners who so generously offer their properties for our 100+ miles of trails to go through their backyards in Caledonia and Essex County. I also always have to mention that the number 2 rated trail, mountain bike trail in the world is in Essex County. It's a big deal. Perfect. All right, important things. So while private landowners who are enrolled in the current use system, as you all very well know, they do receive an incentivized tax benefit. Those private landowners who allow Vermont's public trail system to exist, they do not. And Vermont's public trail system is made up of KT, this is Vast Trails, Green Mountain Club, the Catamount Trail, the Vimba chapters, VASA. They are prohibited from directly being compensated because it would compromise the landowner's protection under the state's liability statute. So with this increased demand on trail assets, these nonprofit trail stewardship organizations, they are facing more and more challenges in retaining public access to these vital trail corridors. So the question of how we develop an appropriate mechanism to recognize private landowners will be a critical component of how we retain public access to Vermont's trail system, which includes their key role in maintaining a strong forest culture, ensuring that our forests continue to support the economy and enhance Vermont communities. There is being introduced probably next week. I ask you to, support our roadmap, of course, but there will be an act to incentivize landowner participation in public recreation that you'll see coming through the House and the Senate. And I also asked you to join us February 12th for Outdoor Recreation Day in the State House, and February 20th is NEK Day at the State House, also very important. So I hope to see you guys again. Thank you for listening and for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, summarize, and I know the 3 o'clock hour is coming up real quick. So, yeah, I think I'll summarize by saying the roadmap provides this framework to sort of understand these actions that individual members, the sort of investment and innovation that David is doing, the role that Kingdom Trails is playing in serving recreational needs, community needs, and bring a showcase for sustainable forest management for people who may not have a lot of exposure to that. What the roadmap is hoping to do is champion those individual members' work, but also replicate it, expand it, provide a framework to promote that type of innovation and growth. I'll buzz through these last couple slides real quick. The roadmap identified 9 high priority short-term actions. Some of those you've heard us talk about already. Invest in accelerating innovation, what David's doing. Sort of this last one, to promote the economic contribution of forests, which is what some of the things that Abby's talking about. And then, promote working forests and land use planning, some of the work that Luke and his organization does. So this is how we got started. And over the last year, we focused on these 3 areas to really get going. But we have 30 actions in the roadmap, and it's a 10-year vision. And so there's so much work to do to fully implement the roadmap and achieve the potential of this great vision for Vermont's forest sector. So my last slide, what's our implementation progress to date? We've created this implementation steering committee. We're lucky to have this great mix of folks from private sector, conservation organizations, land management organizations, academia, other forest processing businesses, and even the Vermont legislature on our implementation steering committee. It's great to have Representative Lipsky advising us. So this is this fantastic group that's championing the roadmap. We have no staff dedicated to the roadmap. Everyone does this in addition to their day jobs, and it's a real passion project for those of us that are involved. So it's great to have that committee. We've done a lot of socialization of the roadmap. There's been a lot of work on fundraising and financing efforts, anything from writing grants to support roadmap direction to implementation directly from federal partners, to working with VEDA, Vermont Economic Development Authority, to line up financing to support higher or lower impact and more modern logging equipment for our partners that are out working in the forest. We've done a fair amount of legislative engagement. We did a couple tours this past fall. We hope to do more with this committee and other members, including a trip to Mansfield State Forest in a couple of weeks to see that timber harvest. Some of our areas of focus for 2025 is thinking about workforce development, because as you've heard, that's a challenge in our sector. Accelerating innovation. Some of our partners, Northern Forest Center and Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, have an opportunity to apply for a sizable funding from the National Science Foundation for creating an innovation hub in the forest products sector in Northern New England, including Vermont, through this CONFER program. We're still working on organizing our ISC, that's the Implementation Steering Committee, and externally communicating what we're up to, as well as I said, securing funds, tracking progress, and sharing those results, and hoping to have a dashboard publicly available so folks say, hey, what's happening with Action 9? And we can put information up on that dashboard. So finally, it's a 10-year vision. It's a 30 actions. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but it's a great framework for the forest sector, the state, and our partners to revitalize and grow the economy. We're certainly open to ideas and participation. We're very appreciative of the support that the legislature has provided to the roadmap to date. Thank you.
Representative Nelson has a question, and I think that if you want to direct it to anybody, that's fine in the room. We don't need to shuffle anymore.
Great.
Thank you, Chairman Durfee. Where'd you learn speed talk like that so clearly? You familiar with Doc Primo's trails up in Newport?
I'm
Dirt.
not. The Memphremagog Trails?
Yeah, Memphremagog Trails.
Yes.
Okay, and he ran into some issues with Act 250. How was that affected? If you folks had the same problems and?
I do everything in my power to avoid Act 250. There is some very unclear language when it comes to trails in Act 250. Whether trails are considered development or not is actually been in the legislature in the past. I think what we're working on this session, actually not even this session, just with FPNR, is to come up with some really strong best management practices, agreed upon best management practices between the trail stewardship organizations and the government. And once we can solidify those, we then feel more confident that we can then approach the legislator about being exempt from Act 250. An 8-inch single track trail is not the same as a Walmart. And I think there are some strides that we could do, because what I will say is my 106 private landowners, if they do not want Act 250 on their private properties. And that would be the end of Kingdom Trails if they caught any length of that being a possibility. And that would be extremely detrimental to our kingdom.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, VASA runs across our land, Bass runs across our land. We've never had any issues with Act 250. They've never been around. Doc Primo was trying to get his trail coming from where he is and coming up to our land, and he couldn't get there because of Act 250. It's a shame because they could have so much more. We like to share. We're a large landowner, but we are open to sharing for our neighbors' enjoyment and for our local businesses to be able to prosper. So thank you for what you do.
I agree. I think there are definitions like what is considered a project in the trail world really need to be worked out with the legislators. So we know what can we build and what can't we build in order before it triggers. Talk a little bit about what best management practices mean. Oh, what they are. Yeah, I mean, right now trail building came out of the logging industry. Loggers have and foresters have AMPs, and a lot of trails, like I said, were founded on old logging roads. And so, ours are smaller in diameter, or some of them, vast trails are pretty wide. But where it comes to grades and erosion control and water bars, and the way the water flows so all of that will need to be taken into consideration. But we do lean on the forest industry and look to them.
Well, the forest industry's done it, farmers have done it. We can work together and get this done for you folks. Cause it is really, if you've never been to Burke in the summertime, holy cow, it's busy. And it's generating, and it's in a good way, and it's generating revenue for a town. You lost your great sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to pull a lot of sawdust out of there, and it was a shame to see that one go.
Fun fact on a Friday afternoon, the sawmill in downtown East Burke produced the wooden toilet seats for World War II.
Wow.
Just thought everyone needed to. Oh my God.
Okay.
You must be so proud.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, first of all, Oliver, I'm pleased to report that I got permission from Chairman Durfee to spend from 9:30 to 2:30 for our next information committee. So
Thank you, Chair.
thank you. This was a really excellent presentation, and to all the presenters. They typify the collective and collaborative wisdom around the big wrap of what our forests mean to Vermont and to our economics and our future. I think one comment might be that the actual timber harvesting, the folks that are on the ground in the woods, and maybe that's really, and the challenges they face in a myriad of pressures could be in the future included. But I don't think, well, other than that, I think
They're all too busy.
perfect.
They're too busy in the woods right now with the good weather. No,
I'm the only one who isn't.
it's a great, I mean,
Yeah.
we took pains to have a forest products person, a forester, who's also a wildlife
I
biologist,
think you
a
know.
land manager and a recreation, but you're right, every logger we asked, can you join us? They said, I'm too busy, I'm working in the woods. But I think once you get into mud season, they might be more available to come speak to the committee at their angle, just this roadmap and other needs that their sector has. But I think it's a great comment, thank you, but perfect.
There's a recording of Sam Lincoln's presentation at the New England Society of American Foresters conference in Burlington last year that speaks beautifully to that question. So we can circulate that if you want. It's very articulate.
That'd be great.
Any other last questions? Right, well.
I just had one. I wonder if we can find out where this table's made. Speaking of you're like, here's wood, it's like, we could make this here, right? And we could process it here, but.
There is a table in this building, Jed made, not to answer your question, right? There's a table made from Senator Leahy's land that was harvested
In Middlesex?
from his Washington County property. That was milled, trucked by Blue Hill Logging and sawed down in Pittsburgh and made into a table right on the State House lawn.
20 table.
20 tables, people bought and paid for and donated all that money to Habitat for Humanity.
Huh.
That's a better answer to
Yeah,
why.
it-
It's a beautiful sugar maple table.
If I'm not mistaken, it was June 6th and it raised $40,000 for local habitat.
Representative Lipsky helped make that table.
Oh, I was one of many, believe me.
Other legislators, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
That's, I'd like to think that Vermont wood products businesses could once again buy their raw material in Vermont to make these kinds of tables. Particularly, Chris talked about the Forest Products Center that he's making. I visited a cabinet maker in Heinsberg who used to get his wood at A. Johnson. Now he has to buy it in Massachusetts, and it's not harvested in Vermont since A. Johnson closed. That's unfortunate, but if Chris is successful with this Forest Products Center or other businesses follow suit, he wants to buy his raw materials in Vermont. He just can't find a source right now. So that's where one of the things we're hoping Roadmap can contribute.
Just final comment, follow up on that, Alan. And bad news for you, Chris. The small scraps of wood didn't go into pellets, but they are fabricating new gavels for the house and gavel for the center. So
Good.
I regret
Good.
if you wanted.
Not pelletized.
It's all right, that's all right.
The carbon
We're the
footprint of
end-
getting the tops.
We're the end of the road. I mean, we take the very top.
But that's to be exhibited hopefully in the future.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice weekend and